All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? Welcome everyone to the Caregiving Wisdom Series. We're featuring experts as a part of this Caregiving Wisdom Series from across the nation who bring both professional and personal aspects and learnings to the caregiving world that we all live in. Hi, I'm Deb Kelsey Davis, and with me is Kelly Johnson. Together, we're the co-founders of Nourish for Caregivers, and we're caregivers ourselves. We're truly excited to bring this series to you. We know that your time is precious, so you've made a choice to spend an hour with us, and we're going to respect that time. We believe that what makes this series different than many other things that are offered out there to caregivers is the fact that we address not only the practical and the emotional issues within each topic, but also the spiritual. So, with no further ado, this evening we're going to bring you Melissa Comeau to share her wisdom on caregiving for a service member or veteran. But before we begin,
we'd like to begin with a prayer. So if we'll just take a moment to quiet ourselves, place ourselves in the hands of the Almighty, take a deep breath and relax, let go of the worries and the cares of today, and just take a moment to be present. Consider your breathing, and just let out all your worries and cares as we take a moment. And we begin. Heavenly Father, we bow our heads and we raise our prayer of gratitude for the military service members and veterans who have served in this great country of ours. It is truly an honor to care for them, Lord. Fill our hearts with love, guide our minds, help us to make wise decisions. Give us patience and understanding. Help us with what we need. Just as they sacrificed for us, help us to be inspired by their courage and send your Holy Spirit to give us the courage that we need. Today and every day, we thank you for the opportunity to care for our heroes and for the blessings that we receive in doing so. Amen.
so let me give you a little background about our guest tonight, Melissa Comeau. You know, we're honored to have you here, Melissa, and Melissa serves as the director of the American Red Cross's Military and Veteran Caregiver Network. Now, I will share with you all that my father is a World War II veteran. I did not know that this amazing resource existed until I met Melissa. She's actually an author. Her book, Sleeping with the War, was published in 2015, and you know, it has brought the family and caregiver's perspective to life after combat. Melissa served as a fellow for the Elizabeth Dole Foundation in 2014. Melissa's appointed to the Federal Advisory Committee for Veterans, Family, Caregivers, and Survivors of the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. She's a recognized advocate for the military and veteran community with a career supported by an MSM. Melissa, what is an MSM?
Masters of Science in Management.
There we have it. In Information, Technology, and Project Management. Her education and background have made her a valuable resource and a pioneer in the development of technology to support caregivers. Melissa's invested in the long-term care of our nation's heroes, as well as their families, children, caregivers, and their survivors. She's also the spouse of a caregiver of a combat wounded Marine. So now we turn to Melissa.
Thank you so much, Deb and Kelly. This is such a wonderful opportunity, and I'm so grateful for everyone spending some time with us this evening. That bio is so nice. Thank you for that introduction. What it doesn't tell you, though, is that I'm a little bit fun, and my greatest joy is connecting people to other caregivers, connecting caregivers to resources, and really approaching this whole caregiver journey with love and compassion for myself and for others. So I'm going to start with my profession or my personal story before we get over to all the fancy stuff we do at the Red Cross. So my husband is Staff Sergeant Stephen Comeau, and he served proudly in the United States Marine Corps for nearly 13 years. During that time, he deployed 5 times to combat in support of both Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. He was awarded a Purple Heart for injuries he sustained in a rocket-propelled grenade explosion. And he doesn't just have one injury, he has many injuries that require care on multiple fronts. His physical injuries are quite significant, and when we were first going through this, he was 35, and the doctor said that he has a body of a 65-year-old. So that talks a little bit about the wear and tear his body experienced through military life. But he also has the invisible injuries, traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, which require a completely different set of caregiving skills. I don't like to say that this journey has been hard. It has been lonely. In the beginning, I didn't know another caregiver. I didn't even know really that that's what it was called, what I was dealing with. We were transitioned to Camp Pendleton, where we went through Wounded Warrior Battalion West to take care of my husband's comprehensive medical needs. And the very first time I was called his caregiver, I was sitting outside of the neurology office, and I'll never ever forget this because I reacted so poorly to that word. I had been a proud military spouse, very active and supportive, and knew that identity well, but this caregiver word was new to me. And this nurse came out and asked me if I was Stephen's caregiver. And I kind of was like, no, I'm young, like, and she kind of giggled, and then I persisted and said, no, I'm just his wife. And she was a very kind woman. I do know why she was placed in my path, but she said, you are probably both. And that stuck with me. And then later that night, I went home and I Googled caregiver, and I found resources and support and more information about what it was our family was experiencing. Because up until that point, I had found lots of support for military spouses that had to do about preparing for the next deployment or having school-aged children in all the, PCSs or permanent change of duty stations that go on. But I had never found the support I was looking for until someone called me a caregiver. So that night, while Googling after everyone had gone to bed, I started researching what it meant to be a military caregiver, specifically military spouse, military caregiver. I thought those words would go together. And back in 2013, I couldn't really find anything specific to me. I could find a lot of things about caregivers, but it was more like finding a caregiver for like an elderly loved one. And it didn't tie into the military experience. And it certainly didn't look like anyone I knew or any of the other people that were going through this journey with me. So a lot of great opportunities came my way. I served with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. I met with congressional leaders, and I served on the VA advisory committee. But I did that all because I wanted to create something that wasn't there for me when I found out I was a caregiver. And what I created, I'm going to start sharing my screen now, along with other caregivers and other great supporters, we started the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network back in 2015. So I have this fun little presentation. I promise it's not like a slide deck. It doesn't feel like a PowerPoint. And I'll go through it as quickly as possible so we can get to the fun question and answer conversation, or we can take this in another direction if that's helpful. But I like to start with what we are all about, and that's connection, engagement, knowledge, skills, and hope. And we serve caregivers of all eras. So I'm going to get started here. So connection, about us. Our team is all caregivers. So there's me and our wonderful colleague, Dr. Rachel Moyers, who's on with us tonight, and then our programs and services manager, Melissa Johnson. I think the by caregivers for caregivers really resonates with everything that we're trying to do in the peer support realm. And so we live it, we get it, and we are here to support other caregivers going through this journey with us. So this has a lot of information on it, sort of about why we got started, how we got started. But the only point that's really important is we were incubated at TAPS, or the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, and they have nearly 30 years of experience in peer support for the survivor community. And what we were able to learn from them is how to take their best practices and change the scope to caregivers. And we were set up with a lot of support in grief and loss, because much like with death, there is grief and loss associated with injury, with loss of faculties, with loss of work, with loss of family, with loss of relationships. And so we have some of that grief peer support built right into everything that we do at the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network. Then in 2017, we were transferred over to the American Red Cross as part of service to the armed forces, because we wanted to be able to continue to grow and scale and reach military and veteran caregivers really across the globe. And the Red Cross has allowed us to do that. So who does the MVCN serve? So we serve caregivers of all eras, all stages of life, all relationships, and across all locations. A lot of times I've found other caregivers that assume that because they're a family member, they're not also the caregiver. And I always like to point out that you are probably both. Just like that nurse told me, you're probably both. And we also have a lot of veterans that are caring for other veterans that don't necessarily know that they're taking on a caregiving role and that there's support for them specifically. So we do spouses, parents, siblings, children, family members, friends, neighbors, battle buddies, veterans. Basically, anyone who's caring for a service member or veteran is welcome at the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network. Our network operates 24/7. We also provide training to caregivers, and we have a strong emphasis on high quality structured peer support. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but we really pride ourselves on the consistency, the best practice, the training, and all of the caregivers with a common goal of just wanting to provide support to one another. Engagement is our next one. And this gets really into our 3 evidence-based programs. So we have an online community. It operates 24/7. We have peer moderated groups, discussions, topics, chats. You'll find things like benefits and compensation. Caregivers for veterans have many, many benefits and resources available to them. And so we have a group dedicated to that. Employment and workplace support. Many, many caregivers are working on top of caregiving for a veteran or service member. How do you balance that? That's what that group's about. Education and training. So that can be learning about education and training opportunities for the caregiving role, but also educational scholarships for other areas that caregivers might want to get education on. We really do have the atmosphere of mutual respect and confidentiality, and we have crisis interventions and referrals for any caregiver that might be in distress. And this is Abigail. She's one of our wonderful members. Hearing these lovely quotes that you can read there, really, they just make my heart feel better, especially that piece about not being alone, because I remember how alone I felt too. We also have a peer mentor program, and this is your traditional one-on-one peer mentorship. We have a very exciting IT platform that we created. It's completely custom. I call it our caregivermatch.com, and it matches caregivers to other caregivers looking for support that closely align with their own caregiving journey. So the same era of service, whether their service member was enlisted or an officer, the different types of injuries that one can experience, whether you're a veteran yourself. Like I said, we have many veterans caring for other veterans. It also goes in to talk a little bit about what you're hoping to get out of the peer mentoring experience. Some caregivers are just looking for resources and how to maybe build communication skills. Others are really interested in more of a learning and growing way of approaching the mentorship. And we offer all sorts of different ways to match that. And then we have a caregiver lived experience where caregivers can really share what's most important to them, what they're looking for a match with. So we see things like, do you live in an urban, rural, or suburban community? Do you have a large family, a small family? Children, special needs children. Same goes with grandchildren and special needs grandchildren. Service dogs comes up a lot too. So that's in there. And then there's sort of a catch-all. If there's a very specific issue you're hoping to be matched on, we hope that we could find a mentor that could meet that, but you could always communicate with your mentor before engaging in the full mentorship. We really like that it empowers caregivers to pick each other. It's been successful so far. Our caregiver mentorships last for about a year. And my favorite thing is someone will come to us looking for a mentor. They'll participate as a mentee. And when that mentorship ends, they turn around and mentor another caregiver coming behind them. The eras of service are crossing. So sometimes we have a Vietnam era caregiver helping, you know, our Iraqi freedom caregiver, or World War II caregiver is helping a Vietnam caregiver. So we really appreciate the various ways that our caregivers come to us, and love that there's this cross-generational support for one another. This is another great quote we got about our training. Our training is an online training, and then it provides, it's a two-part training. There's a little video that you watch learning about the history, best practices, some communication skills, and then we offer a role-specific training based if you want to be a peer mentor, if you want to be a peer moderator, or if you want to be a peer facilitator. Those are all very different, so we have role-specific training for each role that the caregiver chooses to volunteer with. Support groups. These are probably our most popular feature right now, especially since we have been able to deliver them completely online right now during the pandemic for multiple times during the week. So our groups are facilitated by two trained peer facilitators. They meet at convenient times. So this time right now, we actually are still running a caregiver chat on MVCN. This tends to be a good time for caregivers. And I'm really grateful that Deb and Kelly know that too, that this is going to be a good time to get caregivers when they can participate in something like this for themselves. We also offer them in the community. We work with our Red Cross offices or other facilities that might be partner used. We have other organizations come to us for their training for their own peer groups. We really just want to support best practice peer support and what it means to create these environments where people feel safe and welcome, and most importantly, supported. And this is Angelina. We also do phone calls because not everyone is comfortable with a computer, and we have found that phone trees were very commonly used before, and other caregivers are really easy to use a phone tree, and they'll all join on a phone call and come in and get peer support that way. So we're honored that we can offer that as well. So knowledge, this is Marjorie, and if you don't know about the Code of Support Foundation or Healing Household 6, Marjorie works for the Code of Support Foundation and has done all of our training, and then she came to another group we did for education and training on Healing Household 6. It really was nice to hear from her that it was helping her not only in her own caregiving experience, but also in her professional work. So very grateful for other caregivers working in this space and just doing amazing work. So we have two great resources that I'm going to talk about here. The first is our Hero Care Resource Directory. And this, I should tell you a little backstory. So the Red Cross is one of the most well-known disaster relief organizations. And they have this wonderful tool called Aunt Bertha that's been used by all of our case managers in disaster cycle services to get to real local community-based resources wherever a disaster might occur. And it has a really good case management tool, and it's what the professionals use when looking for resources across, the globe. And so I said that caregivers could really benefit from that. And so I worked with the team at Aunt Bertha and our Hero Care Network to develop Hero Care Aunt Bertha, which is a public-facing version of this case management system. And the best thing I can tell you about it right now is that there are at least 800 resources for every zip code in America. So no matter where you live, you're never going to enter in your zip code and get no results. All of the resources that are listed on Aunt Bertha are also vetted. So they have been checked that they're still operating. If they, for some reason, have to close down, like COVID closed a few, or COVID created more resources, Aunt Bertha can almost do that in real time. So if a veteran or a caregiver reaches out to a resource they found on Aunt Bertha, they can be sure that that resource is open and ready to help. And I hope you'll visit that website because There are really just lots and lots of resources for you in your community. And sometimes it's good just to see what's out there. We also have a caregiver calendar, and you can see our website here, redcross.org/caregivers. And this calendar has events. This event tonight was put on our calendar, but we have events online, in your community, across the nation, national conferences. But we really try to give caregivers an opportunity to see what types of events are out there and what other organizations are providing these types of services and events and opportunities to engage. So our caregiver calendar is very popular. Skills, I already talked a little bit about our training, but it is a two-step process. People who are interested in getting training or starting as a volunteer at the Red Cross can come directly to us at the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network, or go through Volunteer Connections, which is the Red Cross's amazing system for finding the amazing people that do our volunteer work for us. And this is Shayna. She's out of Texas, and she's another one that does a wonderful job, always sharing her great experience, and really her little family in Texas. We're really glad to have her as a mentor on our team. Hope. So hope is my favorite. And I insisted that that be in everything and on all of our program logic models and all of our research and all of our surveying. But how do you measure hope? And so Mary is one of our caregivers, and she said, knowing that there are others going through the same thing is great and helps me feel hopeful. And that really made me feel good that she was using the words that we were trying to give people. Because as you know, there are many dark times when caregiving. And if you just have a pin of light or a spark of faith or hope, it can really transcend some of the hard times and get you through. And I really, really hope more than anything that we're providing that hope to our caregivers. So I do have I know we're going to do questions and answers, but I wanted to stop on this contact us, because this way you'll have all the ways to get a hold of us. If you don't ask questions, or if you have something that comes up afterwards, our email goes to everyone on our team, and we work very hard to get back to you as quickly as possible. We also have the Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, where you can see some of the great work our amazing Dr. Rachel Moyers does. She works so hard to curate excellent content and manage our social media strategy. So we're meeting as many caregivers where they are as we possibly can. But with that, I think I've hit my 20 minutes and I'm ready to start the conversation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Melissa, that was amazing.
Oh, thank you.
I want to start with one question. You mentioned the Hero Care Resource Directory in Aunt Bertha.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's not your aunt. The first time I heard about Aunt Bertha, I was thinking that. Could you maybe give folks a little bit more of an idea of what kind of specific resources they can be looking for?
Yes. Yes. So I'm going to screen share again, because that's probably the easiest way, is to show you rather than tell you. So let me escape out of this, and I will get you over to where you access all of this. So this is our website, redcross.org/caregivers will bring you here. It has all of the information about what I just told you about. If you're interested in joining our community, you just put your name and email here, and we will reach out to you for a verification document. We do that just because we are dealing with military and veteran information, and we want to make sure that everyone in our community has been verified that they are military affiliated, and we can do that really easily in our team. So that's all done automatically. A little bit about us, but this is where you can really dive in to the different resources. So you can go to herocare.auntbertha.com or come right to our website and just start searching. So I'm going to just put in a zip code. I'll just do my one here in Texas. I live in kind of a rural area. So even in my little rural area, there are 1,714 programs that can serve people here in Texas. And these are the different categories. So there's food. During COVID-19, we have seen the need for emergency food go way up And a lot of the other military or veteran-focused resource directories don't necessarily include food banks or food insecurity resources. So that's where we've been able to help there. Housing, you can see all the different things, help paying for housing, housing advice, goods. So we see a lot of things, medical supplies is in here. So helping with different medical devices, personal safety, transit. This is sort of how to get around. Health, this one's very, very helpful. One that we've had to use recently is the end of life care. And this took us right to VA support that was really helpful. Health education, medical care, mental health care. It goes on and on. I'm going to sneak into this one. So we'll just look at, we'll do hospital treatment. So this will go in, and this is how the resources come up. And I know where this hospital is because I've been to this hospital. It's right down the street from me. When you look at these resources, you might not know where to start. So this one only gave me 3, but sometimes because there are so many resources in Aunt Bertha, it can feel overwhelming. And that's when you go to these filters. And in the filter, you can put things, you know, certain health conditions that you might have, if it's an emergency, benefit recipients, low income, senior. You can do it on a bunch of different things. You can also do it if you want to visit, call, or email, the hours they're open, different languages. Sometimes people need things in Spanish, especially. So this will be able to help people get to information more quickly. There are also filters for veterans. So if I just started here and say I was looking for veteran services, it will pull up everything that can come up for veteran services. And you'll see supportive services for veteran families. But there are at least 800 resources for every zip code in America. They currently are tracking whether they're open or not due to COVID-19, and that's happening in almost real time. You can click in here and get more information about the eligibility, the availability, the types of services. And one of my favorite features on here is you can go right to their website or their Facebook or their Twitter. Or what I do is you can have a print view, you can share it, and it will let you send yourself a text message. So if you're on your phone, maybe just in the waiting room looking for resources, you can text them to yourself. So you don't need to worry about keeping a list or trying to write anything down. You can share them on your social media or send them in an email. Maybe you're long distance caregiving and you want to make sure someone is aware of a resource. You can email it to them right away. So that's been kind of helpful in some of the ways that we work at the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network. But you can see there's just tons and tons of resources, and you can drill in more and more depending on what you're looking for. I hope that was a helpful overview. And like I said, you can get to it right from our website or just herocare.auntbertha.com. It's kind of a fun name.
That was very helpful, and I think just the depth and breadth of what's out there. I think it's so important that we all know as caregivers what's available to us. Now, Melissa, to access these resources, I saw that you mentioned eligibility under some of them. To access the Red Cross resources, of which you shared a whole tremendous amount of them, do you have to first go through the VA, or can people come directly to you, to the network?
No, we are absolutely open to anyone looking for these services. So they can come right to us. Hero Care Aunt Bertha is available to anyone. Now, while ours is specifically focused on the military and veteran community, maybe you have a need in your community that isn't even related to that. Well, this resource directory is still open and ready for you to use however you need it. I'm very, very hopeful that, and they call it a social care network. It's a little different than a resource directory. It really does reach out and try to care and get people the services that they need. And one point I want to make about services, about resources, about looking for help is that's okay. That's good. And when you come to a point where you need support, I hope people do reach out. I know that was one of the hardest things for us as a military family, asking for help. You're always supposed to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you just stuff down all that tough stuff and keep going. Well, people burn out when that happens, and they get to a point where then crisis interventions are needing, or there's emergency financial needs, where if someone had reached out maybe a little bit earlier, they could have got the help they needed, deserved, so much sooner. And so I always try to encourage caregivers, no matter what you have going on, there is help, there is support, and it really will be in your benefit to reach out.
Thank you.
As you're Melissa, as you're talking about, getting help, especially the peer mentor program, to me is very interesting. And I would think that those sort of, to me, they kind of fall together in terms of helping people understand when that it is okay and to go ahead and ask for help and where help is available and all of that. So besides that, though, could you maybe talk a little bit more about that peer mentor program, just because I think it is very, very unique and has so much to offer?
Absolutely. So talking about being fun and being a connector, peer mentor is very, very close to me as well. I know I have benefited, especially when you're brand new to this. Like I started my caregiver journey when I was 32 years old, and I didn't know anyone else in this space. I didn't have those safe places to go to even ask for the types of help. I didn't even know the types of help that I needed at that time.
Right.
So I've always valued my elders and learning from those who've maybe gone through it before, and really making meaning of your life's journey. And I feel that peer mentoring is one of the ways you can really take some of the tough things that you've gone through and polish them and share them and find hope and meaning for yourself, while really being a tremendous service to someone else. We use two versions of peer support. So the first is the reciprocal peer support model out of Rutgers University. And the basic program is that you cannot give support without getting support. You know how good it feels to help someone? No matter how big or small, that feeling is real. And that's a key part of mentorship, is that giving and taking and helping each other. So we also preach that our peers are equal. So no matter if you've been doing this 50 years or it's just your first day, you're equal in this space. This is a safe, non-judgmental, welcoming environment where you can build a relationship with someone and learn more about their journey, and they can help maybe guide you on yours. The other model that we use is the companioning model, which is out of the Center for Life and Loss Transitions, Dr. Ellen Wolfeld, who's amazing. And that's really more of the grief, that we go through these losses that aren't death. And if we grieve them and honor them and don't make light of them, hold space for you to talk about the tough stuff, that there's healing there. And not just for the person who's sharing, but the people that are hearing too. So that's really what went into our peer mentor program, and very personally for me as well.
Thank you. You have so many great thoughts within that. Certainly the idea, and we talk about this with Nourish and Caregivers too, is that idea that, we are made for each other. We are made for community. We are built that way. And that certainly is a big part of that. And then the other big thought I thought you had in there is that idea is needing to grieve the small losses along the way. And that helps us recognize and hold on to those or let go of those, but to allow the space to do that, and how much more whole we are as we go through all the way along. So thank you for those big thoughts. Yeah. And again, I would encourage anyone, if they have any questions, to go ahead and type them into the chat, and we can kind of move forward with that.
Melissa, I would like to ask a question, because this actually happened to me. So this is personal. Not understanding my father's veterans benefits. Okay, I did call the VA caregiver hotline, and that was a tremendous resource. If someone wanted to call and find out more about the network, how to navigate it, how would they do that? What would that look like?
So the Department of Veterans Affairs actually has great leading edge programs and services for caregivers. There are two that are active right now, and the first is the program of comprehensive assistance. And that program provides mental health support, there's a stipend, there's some extra training that goes for that. Now, up until the passing of the Mission Act, which just happened, is it 2 years already? Maybe it's only a year. That program is going to be, it has only been available to post 9/11. And part of my advocacy in all spaces has been to expand that. And everyone has recognized that it shouldn't matter which era of service that your veteran served in, that these caregiver benefits should be across the board. And so that has happened. So the VA is currently in the process of opening that program up to other generations of caregivers. And you can find out more about that on the VA Caregiver website, which I know is linked on the Nourish website. The other program, which is open to everyone who's caring for a service member or veteran that's getting care at the VA, is the General Caregiver Program. And that offers things like they have a peer mentor program at the VA, they have a Building Better Caregivers workshop that helps with skills. It's kind of a self-care curriculum. And other various events that will be offered at local VAs when the pandemic's over. But I encourage all caregivers to go to that vacaregiver.gov website. They have a very handy zip code lookup. And you just put your zip code in and it will take you to the caregiver coordinator for your zip code. And usually it has an email address or a phone number for them, but that's your local person. That's going to be the caregiver coordinator you want to have a relationship with, because they can be very helpful as, a care journey goes like this. It's not always good and it's not always bad. But that caregiver coordinator can really be a partner for you in understanding the benefits, the programs, the services that are available to the veteran that you're caring for, also for you as their caregiver. So I strongly recommend people go to the VA. That line is staffed by social workers, and they can answer your questions. They can help you find your local caregiver coordinator if you can't find the zip code lookup, or if you're just having like an awful caregiving day, they're there to listen. And I've heard great things about those social workers that are answering that phone line.
Wow, thank you.
Elizabeth jumped in and asked if you had the links for that, or could you say it again? Do you have any recommendations on how to navigate the VA healthcare system for veterans, especially now during the pandemic? So I'll kind of back a little bit. So do you have the links to that, or could you say that again?
So I could put the links in the chat if that would be helpful.
Okay.
It looks like
super easy. Yep. So that's another best practice we have in our peer support groups. So anytime a resource is mentioned, one of the other team members knows to go and find the link to make sure we're sharing it with people, so you don't have to remember it or try to write it down. Thank you, Rachel, going above and beyond this evening with us. I really appreciate that.
And Melissa, as you mentioned, also in the Nourish website, for everyone out there, we under the Caregiver Resources have both the Red Cross's Military and Veteran Caregiver Network logo. You click on it and you can go right to where Melissa was earlier. Also, we have the VA logo up there as well to access the caregiverva.gov, just to make it a little bit easier.
And I did want to touch, because she asked about during the pandemic. So there have been, I know I'm personally experiencing this as well. My husband's appointments have all been either canceled or moved to telehealth, or very important tests that we have been pushed to unknown dates. I don't have a good answer for what will work everywhere. All VAs are operating a little bit differently. They have it's called Vet Resources newsletter that comes out through the VA. So it's information directly from the VA. They share resources and they're staying really up to date on the closures and if you can have a visitor or what clinics are open and which aren't. And that goes out to about 11 million veterans, every week. So I strongly recommend people sign up for that, because that's where you get the up-to-date information, because the VA website is full of great information, but it's like drinking from the fire hose sometimes. and maybe getting the little digest that the VA highlights, especially related to COVID-19 and closures and services, that might be a really good place to start. for caregiving during a pandemic.
Great, thank you. Melissa, I want to ask another follow-on question. And, I've cared, I'm a nurse by training, so I've cared for a lot of people. In my family, I've cared for grandparents, a mother-in-law. My father, however, is a tough nut to crack. So I have a question for you about how caregiving for someone who is, a military service member or veteran might be just a little bit different. And for me, it's the emotional aspects that I didn't experience in my other forms of caregiving. And almost sort of, I don't know how to say this, he still considers almost everything that happened during the war top secret. He doesn't want to say a whole lot about things that have happened. So I just wonder if, I don't know if others out there also experience sort of the emotional aspect that you may not always find in other forms of caregiving, and what your thoughts are on that, and what you've experienced and what you've heard from others.
Well, Deb, just God bless your dad, because that's not the first World War II veteran story I've heard like that. I do think that there is a level of pride in military service that carries with a veteran their whole life, and very rightfully so. I think really honoring what that is, what service meant to someone, because it's not a job you quit. It's with you the rest of your life. And maybe always having that at the forefront, treating people with the respect that they might have received in the military. We see a lot of that in older generations, people that were very independent, that went and won World War II for us. They don't necessarily want someone coming in and telling them what to do. There's great tools like coaching into care, which can help you with the language. It's done by the VA. But I found that that's very good, especially with communicating with veterans. And then some veterans aren't necessarily a big fan of the thank you for the service all the time, that becomes not what they're looking for. They're looking for real help. And sometimes that sentence doesn't always work in the caregiving narrative. I know with my husband, it was very hard to see my big, strong Marine go through what he went through. And it was hard for him too. He had always been extremely physically fit and very strong, and big broad shoulders, my mountain of a man. And what he went through was breaking him. And the moment they told him he was unfit for duty, it was like a death. It really was. And so maintaining that purpose, that honor of the service, and really treating these proud veterans with as much respect as you can, I found that that's really one of the best ways to do it.
Yeah, thank you. Your story is so touching too, and I think that it's one of those things that we all encounter at one time or another. Thank you.
Melissa, okay, Rachel clarified that. Thank you. Coaching into care. Good. There was a question, I put a question mark by that too, and someone had asked it into the, so perfect. Thank you again, Rachel.
And a lot of this is just awareness. I mean, I've worked in this space for a long time, and so I've had the privilege of being introduced to all of these different tools, some that are offered by the VA and others that are offered by other organizations that specifically want to support you in caring for our nation's heroes. So I always like to share lots of resources, not just what we do at the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network, but there are really good people out there trying to make a difference. And I don't know if you all know this, but one of the best indicators of veteran health outcomes is a well-supported caregiver. It's directly related to the health outcomes for the veteran that you're caring for. So I use that sometimes when caregivers are like, oh, not going to invest in self-care, or, don't think anything is affecting them, or they don't matter in this experience. You as the caregiver are the most important impact on the veteran's health outcomes. So you are directly related to it. And the better supported you are, both physically, emotionally, spiritually, the better caregiver you are, and the better care that veteran gets, the better health he has, the better he or she, the better life that you can have together. So never underestimate the value of investing in yourself. If you're one of the many, many selfless caregivers I know, that investment actually is giving to the care recipient.
Could we put that on a loop and just, you could say that about 5 more times so that it can sink into all these hardworking caregivers. And
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. So important, Melissa.
Underneath a lot of what you've been sharing comes for, I think, many caregivers, how do we begin to understand what that military service member or veteran went through? And you mentioned, I think in your presentation, if I'm not mistaken, that the support groups are one of the most popular things. I would imagine in that there's a bond that happens where everyone's trying to understand and navigate that. Can you talk just for a minute about that, and maybe even your own experience in that group?
Yeah, so before I ever ran peer support groups, I had been to a couple, and there is a natural bond, and there is aha moments. Aha, I'm not the only one. And you start to feel a little bit better about maybe some secrets you're keeping about caregiving, because there are tough secrets, right? There are things that are hard to say out loud about this experience and caring and what it's doing to you, what it's doing to the veteran you're caring for, or maybe your children or extended family members. So our peer support groups, what I wanted to create was a very safe and non-judgmental space, and also to meet caregivers where they are. So we're never going to call on you. We don't go through and make everyone share. If you have something that you need to share, the group is there to listen and hold space for you and acknowledge and validate your experience. They also are very polite and will ask follow-up questions or offer a resource if that's appropriate. But really, it's that, and I call it such a sacred space, where people come in and maybe just for that hour, you don't feel alone. You can say maybe those tough things that you've been holding back with a group of people that might have experienced them, but certainly aren't going to judge you for whatever you have to say. And you can leave feeling hopeful. So we use a lot of humor. We are fans of dad jokes and things. Always try to leave with a sense of hopefulness. We do structure them for an hour, but there are nights where someone might need an extra 20 minutes. And our caregivers naturally give that. I've never, even if the facilitator's like, oh, we'll stay on extra to help this caregiver, everyone will stay on extra to help that caregiver. Because there really is so much grace and hope and support in just being able to be heard. So ours are, sometimes they are so magical, and you'll leave with just tears about how kind people can be to one another. It's really inspiring.
A much needed support. Are there any other questions? I was looking, just checking real fast before we transition. I know we're at 10 minutes to the hour, but are there any other questions? Anything that's on your mind that you would like to ask Melissa? And Rachel, I know that you're out there. So if there's something that you've heard as a common question from caregivers that we haven't covered, feel free to type that in there as well. Melissa, if you think back to your very first question that you had, and now with anyone who's starting this journey, what recommendation would you give to a caregiver as they begin their journey?
So the whole reason that the Military and Veteran Caregiver Network exists, it's because that's what I wish was there when I first found out I was a caregiver. I think the power of having someone who's gone through or might be further along in their caregiver journey, who is kind enough and generous enough to give you some of their time, I will say all along, peer support has been my number one savior in this, to have another person understand, especially from the traumatic brain injury and the post-traumatic stress disorder, because there still is a lot of stigma surrounding post-traumatic stress disorder specifically. And where maybe my active duty military network perhaps had a little stigma, I found great solace and support in this veteran space where people had gone through it, and not just gone through it, they've been dealing with it for 40 years. And the kindness that I was shown, teary-eyed, meant everything. It really did. So I encourage caregivers, even if you can't necessarily even find the words, starting out in these like secure online environments or Facebook communities or post boards that you see, or little, faith-based groups or community groups, veterans organizations, starting to just be in that space. I just know that someone will be brought into your path that can really make a difference for you.
And that's exactly where our hope comes from, isn't it? That knowing that there is someone else walking that journey with us, and someone else who's there to share it along the way, that comes in just when we need them to. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing all of your hope, Melissa.
Thank you. And then I do have a practical side to that as well, because I know peer support, maybe not. One thing I wish caregivers would dive into self-care at the beginning. I know so many caregivers, and myself, for 2 years of my life, I was fully in the hospital, on the base, going to doctor. And in that time, I actually experienced my own health decline. Like, I gained 50 pounds and I had high cholesterol and high blood pressure. And my doctor asked me if I had had another baby because they didn't know what was going on with me. And that was really because I had not, the only food I ate was whatever my son didn't finish. I was just going a million miles an hour. I wasn't sleeping, just pulled in a lot of directions. And I never even thought to stop. I call that the superwoman phase of caregiving, right? You're going, oh, there's an injury. Okay, well, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to do it all. I'll fix it. I can do it. And 2 years later, I wasn't physically the same person I was when I started. So I don't like to talk about self-care like something a caregiver needs to do, like another thing on that long, long list that we all have. And we've all been told, you put the mask on yourself first. But what I like to remind caregivers is every minute you put into self-care is a minute you're going to get back for yourself. And it might sound trite, but really just find, because there are days it's only 5 minutes.
Only a minute.
Or, you can run to the bathroom and lock the door for a minute. Maybe no one will ask you any questions. But make sure you start to look at your own self-care earlier in the journey, maybe so that you don't have to have any of your own health issues, or, just to make it a little bit easier on yourself.
Thank you, Melissa. And Kelly, while you begin to share the screen again, I would love to share here that we've got a couple of comments. I'll take one and then I'll let you jump in there, Kelly. From Lucky Bee, this has been so helpful and a godsend to all caregivers. We are a silent army carrying on bravely every day. Thank you so much, Melissa. Blessings.
Thank you.
Melissa, thank you.
We are our own army, right? We really are.
Yep, absolutely. And I just wanted to share that the Caregiver Wisdom Series continues every other Wednesday. So the next time we will be gathering is the 29th, where we talk about living and caregiving in the present moment. And then the next will be in August, and it'll be talking about kind of relationships, caring for my parent, what that meant as a man, a son, and a husband. And that's kind of our outlook as we keep going every other Wednesday with this. And then,
Kelly, I wanted to interrupt for 1 second. This is a very important thing we see here. Caregiving is predominantly, or known to be statistically predominantly, a female role. Look what we have here. two brave men who are going to share some very important aspects of caregiving. And I know Dr. Healy in particular talks a lot about the impact of caregiving on the marital relationship, which I know is something he's going to cover there because there are certainly impacts. But I just looked at that, I thought, wow.
All of a sudden. Exactly. And of course, the resources that many of the resources were put in the chat, and then many of those too are also available on our Nurse for Caregivers website. And coming soon will be our Caregiver Companion, which also talks a lot actually about some of the topics that Melissa covered today, not necessarily from the veteran perspective, but some of those ideas of loss and community and self-care and all of that are covered in there as well. But we thank you, Melissa, for coming and joining us and sharing your pearls of wisdom. And we thank all of you caregivers for joining us as well.
Thank you, everyone. God bless. Have a wonderful evening. And thanks again, Melissa.
Oh, thank you all. It was my pleasure. A wonderful evening.
All right. Bye-bye.